True power does not lie in the ability to destroy, it lies in the ability to uplift, to protect, and to create. When nations measure their strength in terms of weapons, military drills, or threats, they lose sight of what true leadership means. The warning issued by the US and Israel to Iran is a reflection of that very misalignment. Yes, they have the might, the alliances, the intelligence, and the reach. But what is all that worth if it only perpetuates fear and instability? If your strength causes another nation to panic, to retaliate, to burn in silence, have you truly won anything? Power without purpose becomes a burden, not a blessing. It becomes a weapon that not only hurts the other, but scars the soul of the one who wields it. History is full of stories where empires crumbled, not because of their enemies, but because of the emptiness within their intentions. When your power doesn't come with purpose, when it is not rooted in justice, in compassion, in the longing to uplift humanity, it becomes hollow. And a hollow power can echo loudly, but it cannot build anything real. Iran, too, holds a certain kind of power, a history, a culture, a pride that is deeply woven into its identity. But in a world where threats are thrown back and forth, like words in a shouting match, who is truly listening? Who is seeking understanding? Who is daring to ask, what is this all for? Is it just about political dominance? Or is there a deeper hunger for recognition, for sovereignty, for peace that feels just out of reach? When powerful nations issue final warnings, they must first ask themselves, is this the only language I have learned? Has my strength robbed me of my sensitivity? Have my weapons become so loud that I no longer hear the silent cries of mothers, children, and the everyday human being who doesn't want war but wants a chance to live without fear? Power must be tied to purpose, and that purpose must be peace. It must be dignity. It must be the kind of leadership that teaches the world that you can be strong and still be soft. You can lead without crushing others. You can protect your people without threatening another's right to breathe freely. We do not need more nations flexing power. We need more nations leading with purpose. That is what transforms warning into wisdom, strength into stewardship, and dominance into dignity. Because only then can the world finally begin to heal. Warnings may make headlines, but they rarely make peace. When the United States and Israel issue a final warning to Iran, it echoes with intensity, yes, but also with uncertainty. Because warnings, no matter how stern or loud, are not solutions. They are expressions of frustration, of fear, of pressure, but they do not solve the deeper wounds that exist between nations. They can create silence for a moment, but they do not create understanding. They can pause a response, but they do not inspire change. And change is what the world truly needs, not silence built on fear, but harmony built on trust. Fear is a temporary silence. It can make people obey, but it cannot make people believe. It can make a country retreat, but it will not make it respect. And without respect, without dialogue, without the willingness to sit face to face and speak as humans first and politicians second, nothing will ever truly change. Iran, the United States, and Israel are more than their governments. They are people. They are families, dreams, prayers, and hopes woven into generations. When we forget that, when we speak only through the language of force, we lose the very essence of diplomacy. A warning, even when delivered in strength, is still one-sided. It demands, it threatens, but it does not listen. And a world built on warnings becomes a world of walls, nations isolating themselves, preparing for the worst, instead of building for the best. Every time we send a warning instead of an invitation to talk, we choose ego over empathy, pride over progress. And that choice comes at a cost far heavier than sanctions or missiles. It costs us our shared future. What if, instead of issuing a final warning, leaders issued an open invitation? An invitation to discuss, to reflect, to understand what truly lies beneath the tension. Is it history? Is it pride? Is it fear? Is it the constant need to prove strength? Because unless we address the root, the branches will keep burning. Until we replace threats with trust, the wounds will not heal. We live in a world where technology has advanced faster than our wisdom. We can destroy in seconds what took decades to build. But the true test of power is not in destruction. It is in restraint. It is in choosing to solve rather than scare, to heal rather than harm. The warnings may continue, the rhetoric may rise, but until we change the tone, until we learn to speak to each other not as enemies, but as equals with different histories and the same humanity, there will be no peace, only pauses between the pain. And so we must ask, are we warning for peace, or are we avoiding the harder path of peacemaking? Because solutions are never born out of fear, they are born from the courage to listen. The world today stands at a crossroads, and the choices made by powerful nations will define not just the fate of their own people, but the entire global community. While the United States and Israel may believe that issuing a final warning to Iran is a demonstration of strategic strength, we must ask, what does the world truly need right now? Another war, another conflict that will leave behind ruins, silence, and sorrow? Or does the world need wisdom, calm, courageous, and clear-headed wisdom that chooses understanding over escalation? When leaders sit in boardrooms and speak of tactics, alliances, and threats, they often forget that every decision they make affects millions of lives. Not just the soldiers at the front lines, but the children who grow up in fear, the families that flee in the dead of night, the students who never return to classrooms, the doctors who run out of medicine in war, torn cities. These are not just side effects. They are the real cost of conflict. War is never just between governments. It always finds its way to the homes of the innocent. We don't need another war. We need wisdom, compassionate, bold, and patient wisdom. The kind of wisdom that stops to ask not, how do we win, but why must we fight? The kind that recognizes that no nation, however powerful, can claim a moral victory by leaving another in ruins. The kind of wisdom that can look past decades of mistrust and say, we've made mistakes. Let's not repeat them. Iran is not just a geopolitical issue. It's a land with culture, with pride, with people who deserve the same safety and dignity as anyone else. And the United States and Israel, with all their influence and reach, have the unique opportunity to lead differently, to lead wisely, to send not just warnings, but invitations for dialogue, to use their strength not to corner Iran, but to create a space where real change, real progress can begin. Wisdom requires humility. It requires the courage to admit that solutions do not come from bombs or threats, but from brave conversations and a willingness to understand. Wisdom asks, what will this look like 20 years from now? Will we see a region in ashes or a region in alliance? Let us not forget it is easy to start a war, but it is nearly impossible to undo its consequences. It is far harder to build trust, but it is the only thing that lasts. The world is watching. The people are hoping. Let us not add another chapter of destruction to history. Let us be wise enough to write a new story, one where peace was chosen, even when war was easier. History is not written by those who shout the loudest or threaten the strongest. It is written by those who dare to break the cycle of violence and step into the unknown territory of peace. The world remembers those who choose compassion over cruelty, who walk away from war not because they are weak, but because they understand the unbearable weight of what war truly means. The US and Israel may feel justified in issuing a final warning to Iran, but what legacy will that leave? Another war story, another reminder of what happens when pride overtakes wisdom. When we look back on the tragedies of the past, on wars that devastated nations, on conflicts that left families broken, cities flattened, and futures stolen, we do not celebrate the power behind those decisions. We mourn the loss, we reflect on the missed opportunities, on the moments when dialogue could have replaced destruction, and we ask, why did no one stop it? Because stopping it requires courage. The kind of courage that doesn't just wear medals or speak from podiums, but the quiet, steady kind that listens, that sits across the table from an adversary and says, "Enough. Let's find another way." That courage changes history. If the US and Israel truly want to be remembered as leaders, not just of power, but of humanity, then they must know that their actions today are writing the headlines of tomorrow. And the world is tired of war headlines. The world is desperate for stories of peace, of leadership that rose above ego, of nations that could have fought, but chose instead to build. Iran, too, holds this power, to respond not in fire but in restraint, to reject the cycle that has swallowed so many before. And when both sides make that choice, even for a moment, history shifts. It rewrites itself not with bombs, but with bravery, because the truth is, no one remembers wars as victories. They remember the bodies buried too soon, the refugees who never returned, the children who didn't survive the silence after the explosion. These are the memories that linger, and they are not noble, they are heart-wrenching reminders of what was lost in the name of pride. But when peace is chosen, when hands are extended, when understanding is pursued even in pain, those stories endure too, and they are celebrated, because peace, especially when it's difficult, is the most powerful story a nation can ever tell. So let these nations not become more fuel for history's sorrow. Let them become its turning point. Let them be remembered not for the warnings they issued, but for the peace they pursued when the world least expected it. That is the legacy worth leaving behind. In a world where dominance is often mistaken for strength, the act of sitting down and choosing dialogue is seen by many as weakness. But the truth is, it takes far more courage to speak with calm than it does to shout with rage, to open a door for conversation, especially with someone you've long considered an enemy, is not a sign of surrender. It's a sign of maturity, of leadership, and of deep-rooted strength. The United States, Israel, and Iran have all seen the heavy price of conflict. But now the question is, who among them will be brave enough to talk first, not to win, but to understand? Dialogue is not the absence of action. It is the most strategic and sustainable action. It is easy to declare war, to drop bombs, to threaten. These choices are quick, loud, and often irreversible. But to choose dialogue means committing to patience, to discomfort, to truly listening even when every part of you wants to defend or retaliate. That is bravery. That is power. That is the kind of leadership that transforms nations and generations. Think of the people living in Iran, in Israel, in the United States, the common citizens who are not in boardrooms or war rooms, but in living rooms and classrooms, who are trying to build their lives in peace. They are the ones who suffer when dialogue fails. They are the ones who pay the price of silence, because when leaders refuse to speak to one another, the gap between nations is filled not just with tension, but with danger. And every time a bridge is left unbuilt, more fear and hatred grow in its place. We need to shift the way we view diplomacy. Talking does not mean giving in. Negotiating does not mean losing. Sitting across the table from Iran does not make the US or Israel weak. It makes them responsible. It makes them human. It makes them hopeful that there's a path forward that doesn't involve destruction. Peace will never come from dominance. It will come from connection. Even the smallest conversations can spark a change, can create a ripple that turns into a wave of new understanding. But someone must be brave enough to take the first step. Someone must say, "We've tried warnings, we've tried threats. Now let's try talking." This is the kind of bravery the world desperately needs, not in military uniforms or on global stages, but in the quiet rooms where real change begins. In the courage to look an adversary in the eye and say, "Let us not pass on more pain to the next generation. Let us be remembered not for how fiercely we fought, but how wisely we chose to listen." That is the only kind of strength that leaves a legacy. When those with power choose peace over provocation, the entire world exhales. It is not just a political decision. It is a human one, and its impact travels far beyond borders. When the United States and Israel, two nations with immense influence, decide to step away from threats and toward diplomacy, they send a powerful signal that might does not have to mean war. It can mean wisdom. It can mean restraint. It can mean leading not with fists clenched, but with hearts open and minds steady. And that kind of leadership is what the world so desperately needs. Iran, too, stands at a crossroads. For decades, narratives have been shaped by suspicion, aggression, and historical wounds, but nations are not their past. They are their choices. And today, Iran has the choice to respond not in anger, but in understanding, not in retaliation, but in resolve to find another way forward. The world is not watching for who wins this standoff. It is watching for who will choose to end it with dignity. Power is not measured by how loud you can speak or how hard you can strike. True power is the ability to pause when everything around you is pushing you to react. True leadership is choosing unity over division, calm over chaos. When the powerful lead with peace, they remind us all that strength is not in destruction. It's in construction. It's in building bridges, in healing generations of conflict, in proving that peace is not a dream. It is a decision. Imagine the global impact if the United States and Israel, instead of issuing a final warning, extended a final invitation to talk, to reflect, to truly see the human side of every headline. Imagine if Iran, instead of responding with resistance, responded with readiness to engage, to share its perspective, to seek understanding even in disagreement. The narrative would change. The fear would shift. Hope would take root in the very places where hostility once bloomed. And when giants choose peace, smaller nations follow. The world takes its cues from those who lead. If those with the loudest voices choose silence in moments of temptation, if those with the greatest firepower choose dialogue in moments of tension, they teach all of us that peace is not passive. It is profoundly active. It requires discipline. It requires vision. And it requires the courage to disappoint those who expect conflict and surprise them instead with compassion. This is not just about three nations. It is about the direction humanity is moving in. Will we keep repeating history's mistakes? Or will someone, somewhere, take the first step in rewriting it? The world breathes easier when the powerful choose peace. And right now, we are all holding our breath, waiting to see who will be brave enough to let go of pride and choose something greater, something lasting, something that future generations will thank us for.